Thank you. All right, I'd like to call this work session to order on an AFD update on current departments, organizational structure, procedures, roles and responsibilities, recruitment, and training process. So we'll start with a roll call.
Miss Allard?
Here.
Mr. Constant? Mr. Dunbar?
Here.
Ms. Kennedy?
Here.
Ms. LaFrance?
Here.
Mr. Perez Revilla? Mr. Peterson? Ms. Quinn Davidson?
Here.
Mr. Rivera?
Present.
Mr. Weddleton?
Here.
Ms. Zolotel?
Ms. Zolotel is present, or she will be running a little late.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. As usual, if assembly members want to get in the queue, please put yourself in the chat. And if you can't access the chat, please text me and I will add you in the chat. So just like we did some time ago with the police department, where the public safety co-chairs organized a work session so that the police department could update us on a variety of different things happening in their department. The public safety co-chairs have also organized this work session with AFD, the fire department, so that we could get all of the latest and greatest updates from them. So when I thank the public safety co-chairs for their efforts on that. So I'll go ahead and turn it over to Chief Hetrick to get us started. And just for the record, we are noticed until 2:15 for this meeting. So we have a little longer than our normal hour-long meeting.
Good afternoon, and thank you, Assembly Member Chair and the Assembly Public Safety Committee for giving us this opportunity to educate you all about all of the variety of things that Anchorage Fire Department does and our standards and kind of where we're at. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen and turn on the presentation. Okay, hopefully everyone can see a slide that says Anchorage Fire Department on it.
Yep, we can see it.
So Anchorage Fire Department prides itself on delivering a high standard of service to the community. We're a very progressive department. We focus on adopting new equipment procedures to improve the services that we provide to the community. One of the things I want to call people's attention to is the 21st Century Fire and Emergency Services White Paper, which from the International City Managers Association and the Center for Public Safety Excellence. That is actually kind of a template that validates many of the programs that AFD has put in place over the years and where we're, the direction we're headed into the future. And that was also provided to Assembly members and the public on the website. This presentation is a very broad overview of services. We didn't get into a lot of detail because we wanted to keep it to about an hour. And we're happy to answer questions through the presentation or at the end. And since we have a little bit more time than we expected, I think it's probably good if we can hold things to the end, and because we may answer some of the questions as we go along. All right, hang on, I gotta make sure that I'm sharing the correct thing because it looks like for some reason, there we go. Hopefully that fixes that and you guys can just see the presentation side.
Yeah, we're just seeing the slides. Thanks.
Okay, good. Thank you to Chief Boyd for catching that. So first I want to start out with an introduction with a video that was developed by Stryker Emergency Care. It kind of talks about the EMS side of the house.
So just so we're all in the loop, are we having technical issues right now?
Are you guys not seeing the video?
No, we're not seeing a video. At least I'm not.
I think, Chief, if it takes you out to a website, you may have to reshare your screen to the website instead of the presentation.
Okay. Good question. We practiced this stuff a bunch and it still didn't quite get there. Now, do you guys see an ambulance on your screen?
Yes, now we're seeing a video.
Okay. Let's do the video.
Sorry, next technical issue. Now we're not hearing any noise, though.
Okay, let's try this.
Yeah, sorry, Chief. Still no audio on our end.
All right. I'm going to do a phone a friend real quick and see if
For folks on the phone, we're just working through a technical issue. The Chief's trying to play a video, but the audio is not coming through on our end. So thanks for your patience.
so we'll get back to that at the end. I think it, for some reason, the audio, probably user error, is not quite working. So we'll go back to the presentation. Okay, so we should be back at the presentation.
Great. Yeah, we see the slides.
So anyway, it's a great video that a Stryker did. I will definitely share the link with everyone that kind of details the work that we do across the board throughout the municipality. So this is our service area. Our response areas are divided into 3 distinct fire service areas, which are served by AFD, Chugach Fire Rescue, and Girdwood Fire Department. Those organizations also deliver emergency medical service across the board too. So the fire service areas you can see for AFD is the green area, including that green swath that goes up Eagle River Road. The yellow bordered area is Chugiak Volunteer Fire Rescue Department, and the blue area down below is Girdwoods. Our EMS service area is approximately 300 or more square miles. It is technically the border of the municipality, which is the 1,961 square miles. However, we do not service the non-road areas. So GIS is still working on really defining what our EMS response area is, but it includes all of the road system. So it's approximately about 300 square miles. Goes all the way down to Ingram Creek in at the border of Kenai Peninsula Borough, and all the way up to the first bridge on the border with the Mat-Su Borough to the north. Now, Anchorage Fire Department, Chugiak Fire Department, Girdwood Fire Department, we all work in cooperation, as I mentioned, through a contract system. Chugiak and Girdwood are actually nonprofits that provide a basically a level of service within their areas under contract to the municipality of Anchorage, and then AFD is the hoster of that contract. So we have the emergency medical services we deliver is all under one direction established by our medical director for the municipality. And so you get a similar level of care across the municipality as best you can. Within the Anchorage area, it is provided by career firefighters who work for Anchorage Fire Department. Chugiak Volunteer Fire Department is a combination department. They have one paid position, which is the fire chief, and the rest are strictly volunteers with no compensation. Girdwood Fire Department is also a combination department. They have a couple of paid positions, including their chief and deputy chief, and then they are on-call paid responders. I strongly encourage people to have an opportunity to go visit the other departments and the station within your area and get to know those volunteers, get to know all the emergency responders as well as the AFD staff. And for assembly members, ride-alongs and station visits are definitely available, not right now due to COVID, but as soon as the COVID restrictions are lifted, then you are more than welcome to come see us. Within the municipality, we protect 290,000 people and approximately 900,000 visitors to the community. That is an old number. We assume that it's much higher, but this is the best number I could get. Because of COVID, the people at the visitor center were really busy with other stuff and didn't get back to me. And the 18,000 commuters that come in from the valley. The entire municipality is a property valuation of about $46.5 billion. So that's what we protect through the services we provide to the community. Just an overview of how AFD is organized. As the fire chief, I'm responsible for supervision of the entire organization. Deputy Chief Mark Monfort is responsible for our operations section, which is the largest part of the department. We also have a finance section and fire prevention. And we'll get into a little bit about each of these different departments and divisions and how they operate here shortly. I would say that we have 394 funded positions delivering service. We are responsible for 20 facilities. That's our headquarters, our fire prevention office. We have 13 active fire stations, and we have 3 reserve stations that are currently used for storage. And the Regional Training Center, which was funded by the state legislature many years ago, in 2010, but it also serves as a regional training center for emergency service organizations, the military, and law enforcement throughout South Central South Central Alaska, and our maintenance shop. One of the questions we've gotten recently is our demographics, and so I wanted to look at AFD, and we'll start with gender. As you can see, department-wide, we're about 10% of the department is staffed by women and 89% staffed by men. In our line operations section, there's definitely more disparity. We only have 3.6% of our line operations are women. In dispatch, we're totally opposite in dispatch compared to the community and compared to the rest of the department, where 71% of the dispatch staffing is women. And out of supervisors, we have 7 women who are in supervisory positions and 78 men. And this is how it compares to Anchorage. We should be, Anchorage is definitely much more balanced with 49 and 50%. We'd like to see AFD a little bit more balanced as well. And ethnicity, department-wide, we have a breakdown through the different ethnic groups. You can see our numbers, our percentages are fairly low. We are definitely a white organization, 87.6%. Same thing with line operations. The balance is about the same, which is fairly similar to Anchorage in some areas. We're close to those numbers with Pacific Island, but the rest of our minority representation of other ethnicities is much lower than it is for Anchorage as a whole. Our recent application period just closed on September 13th. This is the demographic breakdown we see, and if you look at the gender and ethnicity, it's definitely we're getting there. We're making progress as far as seeing a much more wide variety of diversity who are applying for our positions. We are very happy to see in the 2021 test or applications that we received much more than we have in the past. We were on a downward trend. In 2020, we were granted dedicated funding for our academy, so now it puts us in a much more stable ability to do recruitment and really get out to other groups who we strongly encourage people, or members of, to apply. And Chief Boyd will go into detail a little bit more on our recruitment and our testing process when we get to his section. Our finance section manages everything that has anything to do with money in our organization. We have one payroll person who processes our more than 10,000 time cards. We, just like every other muni department, buy things, pay vendors, and we work strongly with muni purchasing. They keep us on track to make sure that we're following all the rules when it comes to purchases and making sure that we're using the competitive process. Our finance officer is responsible for ensuring that we stay on budget and that we track anything and everything that we do to make sure that we're being as efficient with our resources as we possibly can. Now I'm going to introduce Fire Marshal Brian Dean, and he'll talk about the fire prevention section. Brian?
Thank you, Chief. Good afternoon, Mr. Chair, Assembly members. So this will be a very brief outline of the role played by a division that functions mostly unseen in the background of the AFD. If you look at the AFD's mission of serving our community before, during, and after an emergency, fire prevention's role falls on both ends of that mission. Our efforts to prevent fires in our community involve a continuing cycle of education, engineering, enforcement, and investigation. Through education, we help people understand fire cause, how to prevent it, and then we also help people to formulate plans and to practice and know how to escape should a fire occur. Also, through engineering, we ensure that the built environment is fire safe and can withstand fire impacts sufficiently to allow people time to escape and then firefighting resources to arrive. Engineering also ensures occupants are alerted quickly and fire damage is kept to a minimum. Then moving on to enforcement, we ensure that the places we work, shop, eat, go to school, and even sleep are continually kept in a safe condition for us to occupy. Through investigation, if a fire does occur, we find out what caused it so we can do our best to prevent it from happening again. And then as a deferred jurisdiction, we're mandated by the state of Alaska to maintain a minimum standard of fire and life safety plan review and inspection. Next slide, please. So every day, AFD fire inspectors are out in the community conducting fire inspections. Each month, we complete around 100 to 150 fire permit and fire system plan reviews and conduct around 200 to 250 inspections. Sometimes we even push 300 a month. Next. So as you see listed here, the occupants that we inspect are just about every school, business, restaurant, hotel, retail, and big box store you've been in, and also many other occupancies you never even need to be in. Just to note, there's a couple things you might not expect AFD fire inspectors to have been responsible for through their efforts, but I just want to point out a couple things, and some even recently. Through emergency system testing, fire inspectors identified a critical failure in the backup generator switch for a major downtown hotel that would affect all emergency lighting and elevator function. Another instance, working with AFD operations personnel, they identified water main pressure drops that could seriously affect firefighting water supply and building sprinkler system performance. And kind of a familiar one from years past, fire inspectors documented and highlighted hazardous conditions in a major abandoned derelict building to finally get the infamous Northern Lights Inn demolished. I think that was a good win for the whole city. Next slide, please. So even after education, engineering, and enforcement, we still managed to have fire incidents. So fire prevention also investigates the origin and cause of fires in Anchorage. AFD's sole investigator reviews between 100 and 150 fire incidents each month. Around 50 to 60 of those incidents each year require more in-depth fire scene examination and investigation. And then, of course, AFD's fire investigator works really closely with the Anchorage Police Department when fires are suspected to be the result of criminal activity. Next slide. So how do we accomplish these tasks? Fire prevention currently has 8 fire inspectors, divided roughly between 4 assigned to fire plan review and fire systems plan review and inspection, and then 4 assigned to fire and life safety inspections in geographical areas throughout the city. We have 1 administrative support staff that also coordinates the federal community right to know hazardous materials reporting mandate. Next. Well, I think it's also important to illustrate the work we do versus the work that we need to do. As you can see from the graphic, around 10 or so years ago, we were positioned to accomplish a bit more than we can do now. And actually, every day I do consider the occupancies we're not able to adequately inspect. And I can appreciate what we could accomplish with just a few more inspectors and a second investigator. Next slide, please. Over the years, Anchorage has grown and added new buildings, and with the increase in the number of occupancies requiring inspections, we just find that they're being inspected less and less frequently. And some of our most vulnerable occupancies, where we suffer the most fire losses, they're seeing the fewest inspections completed. There was an example even just this morning. We had an incident about a carbon monoxide on a fairly new building, actually, or complex built in 2012, but the carbon monoxide detectors were not being maintained in there, and we hadn't been in there in a number of years, and that's one of the things that prevention fire inspectors look for, is maintaining carbon monoxide. It could have been very tragic. As it was bad enough. So, you know, whenever we have the opportunities to follow up on those, we really try to get in those. So our challenge in the coming years, and our best opportunity to protect Anchorage, is nearly 300,000 lives and the $46 billion in property, is to identify and address the hazards before an actual emergency happens. And I think that's about all I have for prevention. Thanks.
Okay, next I'll introduce Health and Safety Officer, Assistant Chief Eric Schoeneman.
Yeah, yes, good afternoon. So the Office of Health and Safety for the AFD is a little unique as compared to other emergency services organizations, in that we not only focus on the health and wellness of the internal customer or our employees, but also the external customers, the community at large. Part of my office is we have a position that's rather new. It's called the Community Risk Reduction Coordinator. And our CCR officer, her primary job is to, as you can see, to minimize community risk, threats, and hazards through education and training. The way we approach CRR approach, so it's kind of beyond the traditional fire prevention education only, but also expands out to community injury and illness prevention too. For example, like a month of October is traditionally Fire Prevention Month. This has been traditionally one of the big reaches for the fire service. We go into the schools, send out outreach on fire prevention. And with COVID this year, it was a little different. So my CRR officer actually developed an online educational component that the ASD sent out via Zoom to all students. And that, covered, again, it's escape drill in the homes. It had like a scavenger hunt for finding safety risks in a household also, and covered a little bit on personal health and wellness as well. So that's kind of an example of what the CRR position does. And the other thing we're working on right now is another example is we're developing a human trafficking awareness. This is both for public outreach and also for awareness for fire EMS responders. Another angle on kind of the overall community risk reduction is injury prevention and harm reduction programs. So this is back to taking that traditional fire prevention education, expanded it into a larger focus. Since about 2017, we've been involved with the Office of Substance Misuse and Prevention at the state level. So our apparatus carried the Project Hope Narcan kits, and we've always used naloxone or Narcan as just part of our medical treatment. But what we use the Project Hope kits for is if a civilian family member or bystander uses it on a patient, we'll provide them a replacement kit. So it's kind of this outreach. We're giving them this harm reduction replacement with the kits so they don't have to go find them elsewhere. We also carry prescription medication disposal bags. We have them at our fire stations and on our ambulances. So if people want to safely dispose of their personal medications or narcotics, we have that option there. Another aspect of our outreach is our community outreach referral and education team, or the core team. This is currently one employee on a temporary duty assignment since 2018. He provides outreach and service navigation to those EMS system utilizers that we've identified that are high utilizers. Some of the factors for this increased utilization includes that they're lacking or not engaged with a primary care provider. There's no case management or social services access, have no transportation options other than calling an ambulance to go to the emergency department, non-compliant with their medications, or have reduced cognitive or chronic medical conditions, complicated usually with co-occurring substance use disorder and behavioral health disorders. So what the core team does is provide alternate solutions for these high utilizers of EMS. And what our employee does is he will navigate them to the right resources or provide them different options of transportation to reduce the impact on not just the EMS system, but also the hospital emergency departments. Last part on this one, Chief, why don't you go ahead and move to the next slide? This is just some pictures of kind of what falls under the health and safety purview. Our wildfire mitigation program falls under the Fire Marshal Office, although our CRR does assist as required with that outreach. Another injury prevention program that we've had for well over a decade, since the early 2000s, is the Child and Infant Car Seat program. We have every AFD employee that comes on the department is trained as a car seat technician, and we provide the education and car seat inspections to the general public. So this has been a really successful injury prevention outreach program in conjunction with Safe Kids Alaska. Next slide. And the last overview is just kind of on my office itself. My job is a health and safety officer, and then each shift, A, B, and C shift, has a safety officer assigned as well. So what we have is a pretty comprehensive fire.
I don't know if this is just me, but I just lost the audio from Eric.
Me too, Felix.
So, Chief, I don't know if you can get in touch with Eric and let him know that we can't hear him.
Leading cause of line of duty deaths. And let's see, for every cardiovascular line of duty death, there's an
Eric,
estimated. Yes,
sorry,
sir.
sorry for interrupting, but so you're cut off for like a good almost 30, 45 seconds there. So if you could just tell us the information again for that slide that you're on, that'd be great. And we lost your slideshow. It's not showing anymore.
Chief. Bill, what slide was that on?
This is the one with comprehensive occupational health and safety. Are you guys able, Assembly Member or Assembly Chair Rivera, you're able to see the slides now?
We can see it now. Yes, thanks.
Okay. All right. Okay, go forward, Eric.
Okay. Did I get cut off after the car seat inspections?
Yeah, I would just start over with the comprehensive occupational health and safety slide.
So the last part of the health and safety presentation is just a little bit on our occupational, medical, and fitness evaluations. So firefighters, we face unique occupational health risks and hazards. It's as part of the job. An example is we wear compressed air, breathe compressed air while wearing over 70 pounds of equipment, including personal protective equipment, while working in environments of excessive heat, low to no visibility, as well as numerous toxic chemicals that are found in the products of combustion. Along with this is cardiovascular events, such as heart attacks and strokes, are leading cause of line of duty deaths for firefighters. In a 2013 study, like every cardiovascular line of duty death, there's an estimated 17 non-fatal cardiac events that occur on duty. So with the AFD, not just with our medical evaluations, which I'll talk on a little bit further here, but we've also trained many of our firefighters to be peer fitness trainers. And these folks will work with employees on developing personal physical fitness programs, as well as diet programs. Our comprehensive medical evaluation and screening program is based on NFPA industry standards for firefighter occupational medicine. So this isn't just like going to your personal physician and getting just a health and wellness exam. This is a very in-depth occupational medical exam that's specific for firefighters and our occupation. So part of this annual exam includes a physical examination and screening and assessments for, say, like infectious diseases, cancer and cardiac diseases, sleep disturbances, occupational stress, behavioral health, and substance use disorders, as well as immunizations. Also part of our program is behavioral health and wellness. So the AFD is part of the statewide Alaska Firefighter Peer Support Team. So we actually have firefighters, dispatchers, and other personnel that are trained to be a peer support provider. So this provides just kind of again, that peer support angle into behavioral health, mental health issues, traumatic stress issues, and whatnot. And we also have a very engaged police and fire chaplaincy program. Part of coming out this fall is going to be a more comprehensive behavioral health program for AFD. And kind of last part to that is cancer prevention and detection. Just firefighters, there's skin absorption of toxic chemicals has been found to increase the chances of cancer. There are certain types of cancers that firefighters predominantly that are higher in firefighters than the general population. This will include like respiratory, digestive, and urinary type cancers. So one of the things that are found, even though we had all this PPE on, is just the chemicals and the toxins that were on it. Still just taking your gear off, you were still exposed to the absorption of it. So we've developed an on-scene decontamination program as they're doffing the gear, and then also just further cleaning, just to try to reduce the cancer risks. Let's see, the last part of things is, as you can see with HSO, I'm also the department's designated infection control officer. And as part of this, like right now, is I developed our COVID-19 occupational health and safety program. So this basically provides a template for the entire department, regardless of what your position may be, on on-duty health screening and surveillance, just how we do our day-to-day work assignments, use of personal protective equipment, disinfectant procedures, and I also conduct kind of the the health screening of potential COVID-19 signs and symptoms in employees and determining whether they go for testing or not. Our incident safety officers, like I said, there's one each shift. They're probably their biggest role is actually going to be the safety officer component on our incidents. And this, whether it could be a structure fire, vehicle accident, hazmat incident, whatever it might be, is they are dedicated to providing that oversight from the safety side, watching out for employees, watching out for the public, just making sure the operations are being performed safely and using risk management techniques. So, and then they also do the initial primary accident and injury and exposure investigations for employees. And that concludes my presentation.
Thank you, Assistant Chief Schoeneman. Next, we'll go into fire programs and support with Assistant Chief Alex Boyd.
Good afternoon to the chair and assembly members. I do thank you for the opportunity to talk to you about our training and program system within the Anchorage Fire Department. Our mission within training and programs is to translate a lot of the strategic vision from the leadership into the practices or tactics and the things that we do, those skills that we apply out in the field. So our role is to select, train, and develop members, also impact quality assurance and improvement through our training programs, as well as evaluate new programs and improvements as we evolve to meet the ever-changing mission of the fire service, as well as the industry best practices and scientific standards that come out and guide our profession. And that really falls under us. So it gives us the opportunity and the honor to touch every aspect of our organization in multiple different ways. Next slide, please. We'll start with the selection, training, and development aspect of this. Selection of these special individuals that serve our community and actually fulfill the Anchorage Fire Department's mission to serve the community before, during, and after starts at the new hire element of bringing firefighters, EMTs, and frontline staff into our organization. That program starts with an evaluation of the minimum expectations, national standards, and needs that our field providers need to have. And then we go through a battery of tests to evaluate suitability and capability, as well as possession of those specialty skills and minimum competencies. Our testing program is a gatekeeper program, meaning at each point of the testing, you must meet a minimum standard of performance to move on to the next level of testing. Traditionally, we see between 60 and 100 folks out of our multiple applicants move through that process. We've had a lot of great success bringing incredible people into the program and are working to expand that selection process and ensure that we're doing more with the folks that we're bringing in. We also have this same process of selection and development for our apparatus operators, our company officers, our captains and senior captains, as well as battalion chiefs, assistant chiefs, deputy chiefs, on up through the leadership chain. We're also encouraging our folks to expand their skills at each level of EMS, taking some EMTs and sending them off to paramedic school. That whole process, as we talk about new hire development training, has varying levels. But for an example, our new hire employees start out and they do 600 hours of a minimum fire training academy just to hit the street and start their mentorship, which is an additional 600 hours of minimum training over the next year of field training programs, as well as evaluations, processing, and skills testing. In the end, they've done well over 12 to 1,500 hours of training before they even hit the street. And as I mentioned, our officers, our engineers, and our leadership team all go through that process. That ties in with our constant support and development of our succession process, so that we always have new folks coming in the door behind the folks as they retire and move up through the program, using the knowledge, skills, and abilities that they've adopted throughout their practice. And like anything else we do, it evolves much like technology, and at the speed of technology currently, we're seeing those scientific changes run through our organization and change our practice on a regular basis. And that's a big part of our continuous improvement model and how we improve what we do and make it the best thing possible for the community we serve. Next slide, please. quality assurance and improvement process, and that is that continual improvement and quality assurance improvement through each process. This is done through post-incident reviews, operational exercises, and also evaluation of our industry standards and best practices under the insurance services organizations, national fire protection agencies, the International Association of Fire Chiefs, International Association of Firefighters, National Fire Administrator, as well as other industry leaders that drive our practices, including OSHA, NIOSH, and other elements. As we evolve and change our practice with the mission that shifts in front of us, you can see on the right-hand side of the screen, we picked simple firefighting. Flowing water may be one of those things. If you see 3 to 4 firefighters working a single hose line and appear to be having challenges with that process, by evaluating what we do, changing our ergonomics, changing the equipment we have, we can implement a process by which 2 firefighters can easily deploy that same skill. And that's just one example of the many things that we approach in our arena of quality assurance improvement. And this goes across the board of programs and equipment. So next slide, please. This deployment of new ideas, new programs, and new things that make not only our work easier, but our service to our community better, include all of the new ideas that kind of come across. Most recently, we implemented the Anchorage 360 program, in which all of our medical therapy, treatment, and transport equipment that we purchased through Stryker is being replaced to the tune of about $8.5 million worth of new equipment that's been going out to the last week and into next week. We will see all of these things coming across in new places, providing new equipment for our providers to serve our community. Also, we've deployed about $2.5 million in Motorola radios that will link to our new air packs that Chief Schuneman spoke of, our respiratory protection, so that communication in a fire scene, which is critical to safety and response to our incidents, that communication is the cutting edge technology that links via Bluetooth into our air packs so we can understand each other on a fire scene while we're in those masks and in those heavy packs. That air pack is another $2 million project that was deployed through our process, and all of these things are culminating at the end of this month with the link of those 3 large projects coming together, and a lot of those came through our program, and we helped support and develop not only the deployment but the development of that process. As Chief Schuneman alluded to, the community risk reduction and the core teams, those were also things that we had an opportunity to help influence in their early phases as we went across. We're expanding our role as tactical emergency medical support with the Anchorage Police Department, as well as fire support as incidents evolve with our cooperative brothers and sisters over in the police department. Big part of what we do is that, as I mentioned, new programs in succession planning and developing, meeting national standards, meeting new science as we see it evolving within our industry, so that we are at the state of the industry and state of the art. And that really is an overview, a very high level and sort of quick look at our training programs and our program development process. Thank you.
Thank you, Assistant Chief Boyd. Now I'll introduce Deputy Chief of Operations, Mark Monfort.
Hi, good afternoon, and thank you for your time. We'll just dive into line operations, and when we talk about line operations, we're talking about our 24-hour responders in our communication section. What you see on the left is a calendar, obviously, of September, but the different colors represent different shifts. And our line operation personnel that are responders work 24-hour shifts. They start at 9 a.m. in the morning, such as on Tuesday the 1st, and they would get off at 9 in the morning on Wednesday the 2nd. The take-home point there is our 24-hour line operations people work 2,912 hours per year as a minimum, which is 30% more by and large than an average 40-hour work week. Our communications folks in our dispatch center are on 24 hours a day. They're broke up into 12-hour shifts. They work 4 days on, 3 days off, and then vice versa, that for 84 hours in a work period. Next slide, please. What you see here is just a snapshot of a single station and a staffing record. We use Workforce Telestaff to manage our employees, which our daily staffing is made up of 102 personnel as a minimum, which includes 4 dispatchers, 3 operations battalion chiefs, 1 safety officer, 20 company officers, which are the captains of apparatus, 2 advanced life support vehicles, 26 apparatus engineers, which are folks that operate our heavy equipment and our apparatus, the drivers and the pump operators, and then 18 firefighter paramedics and 28 firefighter EMTs. Next slide, please. Our available units day-to-day consist, as I said, of 3 battalion chiefs, which are deployed in command vehicles, a safety officer, 9 advanced life support transport ambulances, 4 basic life support transport ambulances, 2 advanced life support support vehicles that are staffed by a single paramedic, 14 engine companies. And when we refer to engine companies, we're referring to a fire engine, an apparatus that has water and a fire pump and is used for primary suppression and or to get emergency personnel to the scene. 1 heavy rescue apparatus that is equipped with unique equipment for extrication and rescue, 5 aerial apparatuses or truck companies, and 5 tenders, which are water tenders that are deployed in non-hydrated areas. Next slide, please. Our true first responders are our communications people in our dispatch center. They are responsible for receiving all 911s related to fire and EMS throughout the entire municipality of Anchorage. They're a secondary PSAP, public safety answering point, to APD, which means APD gets the initial 911 call, and if it's fire or EMS or rescue related, it is transferred to us. Our folks triage, as I mentioned, all of those 911 calls and deploy emergency resources throughout the entire municipality, to include Chugiak and Girdwood. They also provide pre-arrival life-saving instructions prior to emergency responder arrival. Additionally, they triage and deploy all the Anchorage Safety Patrol incidents and all the private ambulance services within the municipality of Anchorage. Next slide, please. Some numbers for you, 2019 dispatch statistics, and a couple points of interest. Over on the right-hand side in the total column, you'll see our dispatch center handled 136,000 plus calls throughout the year of 2019, over 430,000 radio transmissions, and 31,000 911 calls. And then on the bottom, if you want to look at that at some point, there's average call processing time and so on and so forth. From the number of 911 medical 911 calls, ASP calls, private ambulance service calls that our dispatchers handle, they touch essentially 56,000 plus patients a year telephonically, and triage and deploy appropriate treatment. Next slide, please. AFD overall response volume from 2002 to 2019. You'll see there is maybe a transient.
It happened again. Mark, I just lost your audio. Chief, if you can let Mr. Monfort know that we can't hear him. And then just a reminder to the members.
Okay, are we back?
There you go. Yeah, you're back.
Okay, very good. Chief, can you bring the presentation up again? Okay. I think I dropped off at, we had a transient dip of 3118 back 4 or 5 years ago, but by and large, you can see this increasing trend of call volume and demand for service. If you look at 2005, we had 26,606 incidents we deployed to, and we had 391 employees at that time. In 2019, far right, you're looking at 36,682 incidents we deployed to, and we have 394 employees. So we're +3 on employees since 2005 and have experienced an increase greater than 10,000 incidents in that period of time. Next slide, please. AFD EMS response volume, very similar to the same chart, the previous chart. You see the increasing trend of EMS demand over the same period of time. And I think this period equates out to an increase of 7,000 from 2005 to 2019, with a few minor periods of kind of no movement or a transient downward trend, but by and large, an increase year after year. When we look at our total EMS numbers in our system throughout the entire municipality of Anchorage and the number of people we triage, it's in line with the Anchorage Fire Department being in the top 4 or the 4th busiest medical service in the entire municipality of Anchorage. Next slide, please. This is just representative of suppression activity. So when you look at the far right column of 974, that's how many incidents we went out on in 2019 and extinguished a fire of some sort. So we had a downward trend for a period of time, and now we're creeping back up in 2018 and 19. Next slide, please. This is just kind of an animated depiction of the incident nature problem types that we deal with day in and day out. And you may be familiar with some of those or not, or you may find some that are pretty unique, but we truly are, and we're often referred to as an all hazards organization. And what does that really mean, and what do we do as an all hazards organization? And we'll touch on that in just a little bit. Next slide, please. And this is just an add-on. One of the nature problem types from the previous slide is citizens assist. And what does that mean? And here's some examples of what we do for the citizens day in and day out, and things that we encounter that there is no other alternative to provide that service. Next slide, please.
Okay, I'll introduce Assistant Chief Mike Crotty, manages our EMS section, and he'll go over the next part.
Good afternoon. Thank you, Chief. Assembly members. EMS program in the Anchorage Fire Department is a standards and protocol program to help manage the care delivered by operations personnel. We work collaboratively with Chief Boyd's training section staff and Chief Schooneman for health and safety measures to try to put together guidance, oversight, QA and QI for our operations personnel that are out there on the front lines providing medical care. And I mentioned that I've been around the AFD long enough to work on all but one of these apparatus that you see there, and I'll leave it to you to guess which one that I'm a bit too young for. Next slide. This is just to drill into the staff that I have working with me. I have a relationship, obviously, with the medical director. Medical director in the EMS system, certainly in ours, is responsible for the sponsorship of license and certification. Our providers at the EMT level and paramedic level work under his endorsement. He also has to approve all of the protocols, treatments, and procedures for the care they provide. So the staff working directly under me over on the left side, EMS Quality Assurance and Quality Improvement, Battalion Chief Ben Lewis, has a direct relationship with operations personnel on those ALS support vehicles, or red Suburbans running around. Those are some of our most senior medics, kind of the go-to medics for everybody to use as a resource when they need a little help or guidance, when we need a little extra support on scene. He works directly with them on a regular basis. Basically, you can sum up the quality assurance, quality improvement program and that sort of oversight of the ALS support vehicles as keeping charge of how good the patient care is we do. And we use a QA, QI review, feedback, follow-up, and monitor cycle to do that. It involves reviewing of runs, day-to-day ongoing communication with those ALS support medics, and just kind of looking at training and protocol and how those things affect the calls that we go on. Over on the right, EMS compliance. This is a relatively new staffing position for us, and we are building out and fleshing out compliance efforts in EMS. Narcotics control is a thing we've done for a long time, is now under that officer, Bill Tyra. And he is also overseeing some of our clinical compliance with federal regulations on biomedical equipment under EMS logistics, as well as Medicaid reimbursement and compliance issues with the finance department's EMS billing staff. Basically, everything that we do is regulated at a federal and oftentimes state level, and we need to keep track under one person how we are doing with compliance with those things. Next slide, please. This is just a look at run volumes. 2019 totals are down there for reference, and what I wanted to show here was that if you look at 2020, and the orange is no transport and the gray is transported patients. I think everybody's aware of the fact that we saw a really sharp decrease in our run volume in the early part of the pandemic, but you can see here that we're back up to normal levels, which means the calls have really kind of come back. Note that bar charts can be a little bit deceiving. That orange line in 2020 is a bit bigger than it was last year. That means we're seeing more people that we aren't transporting. What's also important to notice is as we're back to our normal call volume, we're operating in a new environment that we've created on the fly with enhanced PPE use, including PAPRs or breathing hoods, and some very rigorous cleaning and decontamination things after every run. And that affects how much time this takes. Let's move to the next slide, please. This is just another list of some of the kinds of medical emergencies that we see. This represents sort of the most serious types of calls that we see. In the cardiac arena, our cardiac arrest resuscitation program, we're quite proud of the fact that under Dr. Levy's guidance, we've gotten to I would say a national standout program of resuscitation in this community. Our resuscitation numbers of walk out of the hospital alive to keep living your life with a good quality numbers are very, very good. Additionally, we have a really good program to identify heart attacks, myocardial infarctions, and that subset of them, the STEMIs, that requires very fast tracking into a cardiac cath lab. The key thing here in this and all of these other problems is recognition and facilitated movement to the hospital and advance warning to the hospital of what we're doing, along with needed treatments along the way. This care and the recognition comes from the ability to do a good examination on patients and really keep up with your training. And this happens at all levels. Our EMTs and our paramedics encounter these calls. Next slide. This slide is intended just to sort of give you an overview of the relationship between various entities on our medical operations manual, which is the MOM, we call it. Let's ask Mom. This is the book that guides medical care in our system, and it really is a living, breathing document that has been around since in this form since the late 90s. And it is influenced by ongoing QA/QI efforts, by our relationship with the Mayor's Medical Advisory Board, EMS administration, and our relationship with the medical director, as well as training. Everybody contributes their pieces to this, and we constantly look at our performance and our challenges and use that to keep this document up and provide guidance to our people. It is written from a perspective of allowing the latitude to use good personal judgment and act in the best interest of the patient that's in front of you. At the advanced life support paramedic level, it is a 194-page document. At the EMT level, it is 73 pages. And yes, our providers are expected to work from memory 24/7, no matter what's going on. No small challenge. We are an autonomous system. We don't use what industry folks call a mother may I system, where we have to call a hospital for permission. We do have some instances in our protocols where our field providers may need to check in with that ALS support medic and do a consult, but we do not seek permission from hospital physicians to do all of the things in our armamentarium of treatment. Next slide, please. From the MOM, we define a patient by these 3 bullet points. If you call us for 911 service, if you claim to have an illness or injury and we've responded or encountered you, or if we just encountered you in any other context and we feel that you have a mechanism or findings that may be an injury or an illness. And these are people who, whether we transport them or not, are going to get a patient care report written on them, and whom we have an established medical provider-patient relationship that has all the responsibility and liability that you would be familiar with. And documentation is obviously required on them. Let's go to the next slide. This is how we categorize acuity of all the patients that we see. All of the patients we respond to, and whether we transport them or not, will ultimately be categorized in this realm. Status 3 obviously is very stable without a lot of potential. That's the largest number of our patients. Heart attack, if they have stable vital signs, would be a status 2. Status 1, these are people who are in very critical condition and most often need procedures and treatment prior to arriving at the hospital in order to survive. And cardiac arrest is a state that most of you are familiar with. No pulse, no breathing. The next slide, please. I want to just discuss utilization a little bit. This is a chart that we can run on a daily basis, and we try to track how our medic units are spending their time. So if you look over towards the right where it says percent of utilization, this is a snapshot of a busy day. I would say that this is about a 7.5 on our personal Richter scale for a really super busy day for a medic unit. Most of the medic units in the system were pretty busy on this day. And there's a lot like them. The percentage utilization, we'd like that number to be below 30. And you can see here that we had 2 above 40 that day and 3 above 30, as well as 4 above 25. The utilization numbers are derived from the amount of time they spend on an incident. In this case, we're gonna look at Medic 5 that day. They had 13 total runs. No transports were 4 and transports were 9. They were on scene, and that includes driving to the scene, the time spent with a patient, and the time transporting to the hospital in the ones that were transported. The PCR time is patient care reporting time, and that reflects an allotted period of time, and if they called and asked for an extension of that allotted period of time to do their patient documentation, which we leave out hospital with patient. What it does not include is the report writing time for that 4 non-transported category. That's just a little bit hard for us to track. So what I'll show you next is a review of that day where I went in and looked at it and just applied the best judgments and sort of conservative assumptions to say, how did they spend their time on that day? So if we could go to the next slide. Starting with the big orange block, that's the 29% of the time that they were on scene with patients, which you'll recall is a bit above 6.5 hours. The patient care reporting time, I went in and allotted some sort of minimals for those 4 reports that didn't account the PCR time, and we get to that 29% figure. So that's well over 5 hours of writing a report. So that is a bulk of the time in a 24-hour shift. Driving to and from stations, back from the hospital would be about another 6%. This day is a pre-COVID day. And so they spend about 8% of their time, broken down by minutes and doing quite a bit of math to figure this out. Today, this same busy day would widen that green block on decon by about half again, which is going to squeeze some of the other blocks. And it's certainly not going to squeeze the active on calls or the PCR report writing time. So it's going to cut into, for example, the sleep time, which in this case is under 3 hours. I would add that 3-hour sleep block is very likely broken up in between multiple calls that interrupt it. So you may be talking about a series of 30-minute naps. There's always going to be some training, even on the busiest of shifts, and that may be a review of the run, a review of how well we follow policies or procedures, or just researching some questions that came up about a condition. It may be memo review around the table, but we're going to do some training on the busiest of days. The 9% represents personal needs, eating, calling your family during the day, and spread out over the course of a 24-hour shift. It was pretty slim for them that day. No matter how busy of a day we have, we are bound to check our equipment and make sure it functions and doesn't fail on us. So the takeaway from this I'd offer you is that the bigger that orange wedge is, it doesn't squeeze into the PCR report writing time so much it can't. It squeezes into the rest of the time. And that's what happens when we have a busy day. And that's my overview for you of our EMS program. Chief, I'll turn it back over to you.
All right, thanks, Mike. We're going to go back to operations with Deputy Chief Monfort.
I will go through these slides pretty quick in an effort to maybe save a little time for questions if there are some. One of the things I wanted to do is just show you some of the specialty stuff that our personnel in the stations do to keep our operation functioning. Nearly every station has some sort of specialty that they engage in. For instance, Station 5 in Spinard does ground ladder testing for the entire organization. Station 7 in Jewel Lake, they have a sewing team. They size, procure, and repair all of our turnout equipment for our personnel. Station 8 up off O'Malley, Air Resources team. They manage our air resource program. They repair our SCBAs, do static testing of our air bottles, maintain our masks, do fit testing. Station 12 off of Diamond, they are responsible for all of our small tool equipment and repairs and hose. Station 15 out in Southport, they do uniform procurement for us. And on our Class D uniforms, put the Muni label and our folks' names on it. Next slide, please. I mentioned all hazards organization, and what does that mean? So in addition to what's already been explained to you, we have 5 specialty teams that engage in various rescue events and disciplines. And the first is a hazardous material team down here at Station 1, a dive rescue team at Station 4 off of Tudor McGinnis, a swift water rescue team at Station 11 in Eagle River, and a front country team at Station 9 off of D. Armand, and an urban search and rescue team that is housed out of Station 3 over off of Bragaw. Next slide, please. Just an example of our hazmat folks in their level A suits. We have 40 team members across 3 shifts at Station 1. They also provide coverage for South Central Alaska for hazmat incidents and certification processes in additional 100 hours. And when we talk about this additional training, it's additional above and beyond their core job functions. Next slide, please. We have a dive rescue team, as I mentioned, out of Station 4. We have 28 divers spread across 3 shifts there. We use the safe boat that you see in this picture out of the Port of Anchorage for Upper Cook Inlet rescues. Again, an additional 80 hours of training for certification and 100 hours of annual currency for boat operation and dive currency. Next slide, please. 2 more examples of what our dive team engages in. One on the left is just an example of our jet ski deployment. We have 2 jet skis, and on the right, an ice rescue event. Next slide, please. Mud rescue. We have several mud rescues a year down here in Ship Creek area. Fishermen go down and are fishing. You've probably seen them down there. They get stuck in the mud. And we have special equipment. We can go down and inject air and water and loosen them out of the silk and get them to safety. Next slide, please. A swift water rescue team in Eagle River, primarily deployed on the Eagle River. We have 28 swift water rescue technicians. Again, 60 hours of additional training above core job functions and 20 hours of annual currency training. This rescue happened a few years ago where this gentleman was pinned against a sweeper, big log, in a kayak, and we were able to deploy, cut the log, and rescue the gentleman. Next slide, please. Front country rescue and high angle rescue. We have 18 rope technicians or front country rescue technicians at Station 9 on D. Armand. They have a 40-hour course they go through for the initial certification. And this picture is of a recent rescue down the highway, probably 6 weeks ago, maybe a month ago, of 4 family members that were stranded on a ledge, and our team deployed and safely got them down. Next slide, please. Urban search and rescue has kind of 3 disciplines, trench rescue, structural collapse, where we build T-shoring and so on, and then confined space. We have 18 USAR technicians at Station 3 across 3 shifts. Pretty intensive training program for all three of those disciplines, 160 hours of training for the initial certification, and then the annual training as well. This is an example of a trench rescue that we performed a few years back. Next slide, please. And a couple examples of, on the left, obviously a structural collapse due to snow load, and on the right, a confined space entry into a tank. Next slide, please. So wrapping up operations, two more sections. Our maintenance shop, the Anchorage Fire Department maintenance shop oversees all the maintenance for all of AFD, Chugiak, and Girdwood. They have 166 pieces of equipment and apparatus that they maintain with 7 mechanics and 1 logistics specialist and 1 lead mechanic. Next slide, please. And then to wrap up operations, our data systems section, they are responsible again, MOA wide for AFD, Chugiak, and Girdwood, providing support for hardware, software applications. They have somebody on call 24/7 to ensure our critical infrastructure is up and working, which includes our 911 system, computer-aided dispatch, our mapping, our reporting, and our radio communications. Next slide, please. And they do that with 4 total people, one supervisor and 3 system analysts. Little bit of statistical stuff on what they actually maintain in regards to devices and applications. They monitor and keep updated nearly 100 running applications. Next slide, please.
Okay, thanks everyone for covering all of your areas. The last thing we'll finish with is future capital projects, just to keep this 24/7 organization running and making sure that we can provide adequate service to the community. We are always looking for methods to reduce costs, but also maintain compliance with national standards and best practices, and make sure that our equipment and facilities are not falling apart. So one of the things that we have focused on to reduce costs is, in the past, we have been replacing entire ambulances every about 7 years, and we have found that we can actually rebox those. So the chassis wear out. We wear the drivetrain off of an ambulance, but the box, which is where all the medical treatment happens, actually are in pretty good shape. So we will be transitioning to reboxing ambulances. We'll send the entire unit down to the factory in Seattle, or outside of Seattle, and they will swap out the chassis, rebox, refresh anything we need touched up, and then send them back for about half the cost of what it was taking to buy a new apparatus. So that's definitely an area where we're trying to find cost savings. The communication system maintenance and upgrades throughout the municipality service the radio systems and all of our IT infrastructure. We will continue to need funding to cover those costs, and you guys have seen that on a regular basis. And things specific to the service area, we have 4 stations that are in significant need of replacement and relocation, and another facility, which is the shop, and you guys have heard me talk about the shop, but station 12, 11, 8, and 10 did not do well in a recent seismic survey study conducted by the state, so there's actions we need to take with all of those. Plus, station 12 is no longer in a good location, neither is station 11, and stations 8 and 10, I think we can do some improvements on our ability to deliver service in the hillside as well. We will continue to always have heavy apparatus on our bond requests and our capital requests, just because we have to keep our vehicles running, and we do keep them for 20 and 25 years, but at the end of that, they're in pretty poor shape. We have a regional training center that we received funding in 2010, but we haven't had any other expenditures or investment in that facility since. So it's in need of some update with training materials and everything from just, basic computer screens and props that could help with our training program, and constant facility maintenance and upgrades. For example, Station 1, when it was built in 2001 and put into service, we didn't have the power needs that we see now. We have added significantly to the staff there, and we are much more technology savvy, and we just need more power to the actual building so that we can at least keep the bays heated and run all of the equipment that that station needs. So you'll continue to see those. So we had another video and we wanted to get back to the first one, but with time constraints, we're going to cap that off and skip those. So I'm going to go right to, this is our contact information for the community, that so everyone knows how to get a hold of us, how they can see what we're doing. We are also going to post this presentation on our main website, and I'm going to give the control back to Assembly Chair Rivera and be happy to answer any questions anyone may have.
Great. Thank you so much to everyone for the wonderful presentation. Yes, please do send a link to both of those videos, the first one and the last one, to all of the assembly. We would, I think, enjoy watching those. If folks want to get in the queue, we'll go ahead and wrap up this work session with any discussion that folks have. So first, I have Mr. Constant.
Thanks, Chief. One of the slides was a very detailed spreadsheet of all the calls, and again, it went through and it had the number of refers that are made, and so this is a pretty specific question about that, and I'm going to keep asking about it until I really understand how this all works. When we have 100 or so referrals a month, where the hospitals are not able to take folks on, I was actually having a debate last night with one of your firefighters about what that means, because the COVID kind of dashboard is pretty red for our ICU beds. And so I know that kind of pulls together a lot of threads into a mix, but as I look at the red on the COVID response tables for the hospital beds, it makes me concerned. Are we at a normal level for referrals and for kind of being at that heightened level of ICU capacity when we need to pick someone up to have someone there?
So Assembly Member Constant, through the chair, I'm not sure how it really compares to ICU beds. Our divert system, basically if the hospitals have one section or another shut down, so for example, if their cath lab is closed because of maintenance, then we will not be able to send a STEMI patient to the nearest hospital. We'll have to go to whichever other hospital is available. So that's, our diverts cover everything from psych diverts to sometimes they're just full and they send us to another hospital, or it is because of a breakdown in personnel or maintenance, or sometimes it's a catastrophic failure. So those diverts across the board, so for example, out of the 2019 dispatch statistics, we had 1,650 diversions to where our people pick up a patient that needed care and should have gone to either the patient decides where they'd like to go, or if they're an emergent patient, we go to the closest hospital. 1,650 times we had to divert while they were in transport and go to a different hospital. It is really disruptive to our source, to our system, and you will definitely hear much more about that from us in the future.
Okay, thank you. I definitely would love to see a breakdown of how that works and what the calls are for, why they're being diverted. That will help a lot. And I think you might have just won me a bet. Thanks.
Thank you. Mr. Weddleton.
Oh, thanks. I had a couple of questions. One is, you showed calls, responses, or whatever, going up noticeably, but also our population is decreasing. So I wonder, I don't know if you'd covered why that would be. What kind of new things are you seeing? And then second question is, how can you allocate costs between EMT responses and fire responses? That's obviously an issue we've talked about before because of the way we do our property taxes.
So Assembly Member Weddleton, through the chair, we don't have a good explanation for it. We have tracked, we look at municipal population. We also look at age, average age per call, and we have seen the average age per call kind of increase, but not significantly. We're talking, a couple of years. It used to average about 30. Now our average age is probably closer to like 35. So we can't really blame it on age. We should see a reduction, but we have not. And at this point, we haven't had the resources to really dig in and figure out exactly what the cause is to that. And your second question for costing, the Municipal Auditor's Office is actually looking at a way to break down the cost ratio between fire and EMS, and we're still waiting for that. We hope to have something by the end of the year.
Okay, that's great. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Kennedy.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And thank you, Chief and Assistant Chiefs. That was a lot of information, but it was some really interesting stuff. But I have two questions. One is on the slide for the different things that AFD has had to respond to. I just really was curious as to whether we really did, if AFD really did have to respond to a frozen tongue on a flagpole. I did catch that one. And then my other question is, there was some mention of having a role in awareness on human trafficking. And I was wondering if somebody could expand on that relationship with the fire department. Thank you.
Assemblymember Kennedy through the chair. So yes, there's a lot of parameters when people will call 911 for, because they just don't know. In calls like that, a tongue frozen to the flagpole, if it's a 2-year-old and it's 20 below and the parent is brand new, moved here from Florida, they have no idea what to do and they will call 911. Our dispatchers are going to talk them through, better measures on how to take care of it. But if child panics and tears off their tongue. Tongues are significant bleeders. So you'd be surprised at some of the things that you would think people wouldn't call 911 for, but because we have so many people here who are new parents, not from the area, have no support system, 911 ends up being their support system quite often. So yes, we do. We go on some very interesting responses that you wouldn't think someone would call 911 for. And I'm sorry, what was your second question?
Well, thank you for the first answer, but now my tongue hurts. But the second question was in regard to the relationship with AFD and this idea of bringing more awareness to human trafficking. Thanks.
Okay, thank you. So interestingly, emergency responders of all types are one of the first people who have indications that someone has been human trafficked. We can see that in patient interactions, say they get injured while they're being trafficked and someone around them calls 911, usually not the perpetrator or the victim, it will be a witness. So they call and think it's just an innocent thing, and our responders get there and we teach our people what are the key signs of human trafficking. Also, on the education side of it, every opportunity we have to remind the public that this happens in our community is an opportunity for someone to learn and someone to be aware that this could be going on, and give them an opportunity to call 911 and get that, get law enforcement involved. So human trafficking is really important to AFD and our emergency response.
All right, thank you, Chief. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. We're just about out of time, but if anyone has any final comment or question, we can entertain that at this time. All right, not hearing anything else, then really want to thank you again, Chief, and everyone else for the wonderful presentation. Thanks so much, and I'm going to go ahead and close this work session. Have a good weekend, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.